The sun was bleeding orange across the cul-de-sacs of Willow Creek Estates when a moving truck finally rumbled away, leaving me alone with a mountain of cardboard and the strange hush that falls over a new house before you've made it yours. I stepped onto the front porch, cold beer in hand, and surveyed my kingdom. 1.8 acres of manicure perfection, white colonial with black shutters, a driveway that curved like a smile, and a backyard that rolled down to a thin strip of woods nobody seemed to own. The air smelled like fresh mulch and money. I remember thinking, this is it. No more landlords, no more noisy neighbors, no more rules but mine. That feeling lasted exactly 4 hours. At 9:17 p.m., the doorbell rang once, short, polite, almost apologetic. I opened it expecting a neighbor with cookies or a lost dog. Instead, there was only an envelope lying on the mat. Thick cream stock, heavy as a wedding invitation, sealed with a gold wax emblem I didn't recognize. Interlocking W and C shaped almost like a crown. No postage, no address, just my name handwritten in perfect copperplate. Mr. James Harlan. I carried it inside, flipped it over twice, and slid a finger into the seal. A single card slid out. Welcome to Willow Creek Estates. New resident orientation. Tuesday, 7 p.m. sharp. 14 Heritage Lane. Attendance is mandatory. No RSVP requested. No phone number. No signature. Just those 4 lines centered on the card like a royal decree. I snorted, sat on the kitchen island next to the pizza box, and forgot about it while I unpacked books and argued with a Wi-Fi router until 2 in the morning. Tuesday came fast. I spent the day hanging curtains, building a grill, and discovering that every single house on the street had the exact same bronze mailbox and the exact same burgundy front door. Mine were still primer gray and battleship respectively. I told myself I'd fix it later. At 6:58 p.m., I was on the couch in sweatpants eating cold pepperoni when my phone buzzed with a reminder I never set. Willow Creek new resident orientation, 2 minutes. The notification vanished before I could swipe it away. I laughed out loud in the empty house. Mandatory, right? I muted the TV, cracked another beer, and waited for the guilt to hit. It never did. At 7:12 p.m., the doorbell rang again. This time 3 times, slow and deliberate, like someone counting heartbeats. I walked over and peered through the peephole. A woman stood on my porch in a navy blazer sharp enough to slice bread. Hair pulled back, so tight it looked painful. Behind her, half hidden in shadow, was a tall man in the same blazer, hands clasped behind his back, smiling the way a shark smiles when it's already tasted blood. I didn't open the door all the way, just enough to see them and be seen. The woman spoke first, voice smooth as expensive scotch. Mr. Harlan, you missed orientation. We're here to personally deliver the welcome packet and bring you up to speed on community standards. She held up a thick black binder with a gold WC crest embossed on the cover. I leaned against the doorframe. I'm good, thanks. Long day. The man's smile never moved, but something behind his eyes flickered. It really isn't optional, he said, soft as a lullaby. The porch light caught the woman's watch, solid gold, ticking loud in the quiet. She glanced at it, then back at me. We can do this the easy way or the Willow Creek way, Mr. Harlan. Most people prefer the easy way. I felt the first cold finger trace my spine, but I was still new enough, still cocky enough, still free enough to shrug. I'll take my chances, I said, and closed the door. I stood there a long moment listening. No footsteps walking away. No engine starting. Just a faint rustle of pages turning, like they were making notes right there on my porch. After a full minute, I looked through the peephole again. They were gone, but the black binder was sitting exactly where the cream envelope had been, centered on the mat like it had grown there. A red ribbon marked a page near the back. When I picked it up, the binder was heavier than it should have been and warm, like something alive inside the leather. I carried it inside, set it on the island, and stared at it while the house settled around me with its brand new creaks and sighs. My phone buzzed again. Same reminder, same 2 minutes, same message that deleted itself the moment I touched the screen. I opened the binder. Page 1 was a map of the neighborhood. Every lot outlined in black ink except mine. Mine was blood red, and a single gold star pulsed right over my bedroom. Page 2 was a photograph taken from the street, timestamped 3:14 a.m. the night I moved in. The picture showed my front door standing wide open. I know for a fact I locked it that night. Page 3 was blank except for 4 words written in the same copper plate as the invitation. "We've been expecting you." I slammed the binder shut. The house suddenly felt too big, the windows too many. Outside, the streetlights flickered once, then steadied. Somewhere down the block a dog started barking and then stopped as if someone had tightened a hand around its throat. I told myself it was a prank. Rich people with too much time and money playing welcome wagon like it was a horror movie. I double-dead-bolted the front door, turned on every light in the house, and poured a whiskey I didn't taste. At 11:47 p.m., the doorbell rang a third time. This time when I looked through the peephole, no one was there. But the cream envelope had returned, lying on the mat like it had never left. Only now the wax seal was broken, and inside the card was different. Same copper plate, new message. Lesson 1 begins tomorrow. Don't make us come inside again. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the stairs with a binder in my lap and every light burning and waited for morning, trying to convince myself I hadn't just bought the prettiest prison in America. I was wrong. It wasn't a prison. It was a graveyard, and I was the first living man dumb enough to move in on top of it. The next morning broke gray and humid, the kind of sky that presses down on a house like a lid. I hadn't slept. The binder lay open on the coffee table, its pages refusing to stay on the ones I'd left it on. Every time I dozed off, I jerked awake to find it flipped 10 pages forward or backward, the red outlined lot on the map seeming to breathe. At 6:03 a.m., I gave up, brewed coffee strong enough to strip paint, and stepped outside to get the newspaper I never subscribed to. There was no newspaper. There was, however, a single Polaroid pinned under my windshield wiper. Same cream border as the welcome card. The photos show me asleep on the couch at roughly 3:42 a.m., mouth open, one arm dangling toward the floor. The angle was from directly above, as if someone had stood on my coffee table. On the white strip at the bottom, someone had written in gold ink, "Good morning, James. Attendance matters." I looked up and down the street. Every lawn was flawless, every car waxed, every curtain drawn exactly 3 inches from the sill. Not a soul in sight, but I felt the windows watching. I tore the photo in half, then quarters, then let the pieces scatter like snow. My hand shook so badly I dropped my keys twice trying to get back inside. That was when the fines began. 9:17 a.m., exactly the time the doorbell had rung the night I moved in. My phone chimed with an email from an address that was only numbers. 1400@willowcreekhoa.org. Subject line, courtesy notice number 001. Attached was a high-resolution photograph of my mailbox taken seconds ago. A red circle highlighted the color difference between my battleship gray post and the regulation oil-rubbed bronze #447B. Fine, $250. Due immediately. Payment link embedded. I laughed, a cracked sound that echoed too loud in the kitchen. 2 minutes later, another email. Notice number 002. Grass height violation. Current measurement, 3.9 inches. Maximum allowed, 3.5. Fine, $400. Another photo, this one taken with a ruler pressed against a blade of my grass like evidence in a murder trial. By noon, I had 14 emails for $1,300 in fines and a pounding headache. I called the only phone number listed on the HOA website. It rang once and went straight to a recorded message in the same smooth female voice from the porch. All violations are final. Have a blessed day. Click. I drove to the gatehouse at the entrance of Willow Creek Estates. White columns, tinted glass, American flag snapping in a wind I couldn't feel. The guard inside wore the navy blazer. He never looked up from his crossword. I slapped the stack of printed notices on the counter. Explain this. He finally raised his eyes, pale blue, almost colorless. You missed orientation, he said, as if that answered everything. Page 47 of the binder covers appeals. You'll want to read it. Then he slid a fresh red envelope across the counter. My name on the front in copper plate. Inside, a single brass key on a red ribbon and a small card. Tonight, 8 p.m., 14 Heritage Lane. Back door. Come alone. Bring the binder. This is your last courtesy. I drove home, doing 90 on streets posted for 25, tires squealing like they were trying to escape too. The binder was no longer on the coffee table. It was on the kitchen island, open to a page I hadn't seen before, a hand-drawn floor plan of my own house, every room labeled, every window marked with tiny gold stars. In the margin someone had written, "We know which room you sleep in now." I poured the coffee down the sink, grabbed a crowbar from the garage, and spent the afternoon doing 3 things: changing every lock in the house, installing cheap battery cameras on every corner, and drinking enough whiskey to quiet the screaming in my head. At 7:44 p.m., the power flickered. All 4 cameras went black at once. My phone lost signal, even though I had full bars a second earlier. The house dropped into a silence, so complete I could hear my own pulse. At 7:58 p.m., the doorbell rang. 3 measured chimes, exactly like a grandfather clock striking the hour. I gripped the crowbar and walked to the front door. Through the peephole, the same woman in the navy blazer, hair still scraped back, lips painted the color of fresh blood. Behind her stood the man with the shark smile and 4 others I didn't recognize, all holding identical black binders. They formed a perfect semicircle, like a military honor guard. I didn't open the door. The woman leaned close to the peephole, so her face filled the fisheye lens, distorted and enormous. "James," she said softly, "we have a key." She held up a brass key identical to the one in the red envelope. "But we're giving you one final chance to be neighborly." I pressed my forehead to the door and whispered, "Go to hell." Silence. Then the softest laugh, almost kind. "See you at 8, sweetheart." Footsteps receded. I waited 30 seconds, then risked the peephole again. They were gone. But every exterior camera was back online, and every single one showed the same frozen image. The woman standing on my porch waving, timestamp 7:59 and 59 seconds p.m., while behind her the other 5 figures were already walking away, except they had no reflections in my freshly washed front window. At 8 p.m. sharp, every light in the house turned blood red. The smoke detector screamed once, then died. From the backyard came the unmistakable sound of a key sliding into the brand-new deadbolt I'd installed 6 hours ago. Click! The lock turned by itself. I stood frozen in the foyer, clutching the crowbar, as the back door eased open with the slow grace of a coffin lid. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of cut grass and something metallic underneath. A single set of footsteps crossed my kitchen tile, measured, unhurried. A woman's heels. She spoke from the darkness I couldn't see past. "Lesson 2, James. Locks only work when we want them to." Then the footsteps stopped, and the house held its breath with me. I never saw her leave. But when I finally found the courage to walk into the kitchen 20 minutes later, the binder was open on the island to a fresh page. Someone had glued the torn pieces of the Polaroid I'd shredded that morning back together perfectly. Underneath, in gold, ink still wet. "We don't like waste." And at the bottom, a new line someone had added with a different pen, red ballpoint, shaky handwriting that looked rushed. "Run." I didn't run. Not yet. Running would have meant leaving everything I'd saved 20 years to buy, and some stubborn part of me still believed daylight and lawyers could fix whatever this was. So I stayed, but I stopped sleeping in the bedroom. I dragged a mattress to the hallway where there were no windows, wedged a chair under the front door knob, and kept the crowbar across my chest like a child with a teddy bear. The fines tripled overnight. My bank app showed automatic withdrawals labeled HOA compliance fee, draining my checking account in $1,000 bites. I called the bank at 8 a.m. The fraud department told me the charges were authorized by me, signed digitally at 3:14 a.m. with my own fingerprint. I was holding the phone in my right hand and staring at that same fingerprint still smudged with last night's whiskey when the line went dead. At 10:22 a.m., a white pickup with the HOA logo pulled into my driveway, and 2 men in navy polos got out carrying what looked like a surveyor's transit. They set it up in the middle of my front lawn, aimed it at the house, and started taking measurements. I stepped outside. "Get off my property." The older one never looked up from the eyepiece. Public easement for sightline compliance, sir. Page 63. They worked for 40 minutes, ignoring me completely, then packed up and left. An hour later, a certified letter arrived by courier. My lot was being red flagged for encroachment on community view corridors. Proposed remedy: remove the second story of my house. Estimated cost to me: $487,000. Due in 14 days, or they would file a mandatory demolition lien. That afternoon, I drove to the county courthouse to pull the plat maps myself. The clerk, a tired woman with purple nails, typed my address and frowned. That's weird. Says here the parcel was resurveyed 6 months ago. New pins set. You should have the updated deed. I told her I'd never been notified. She shrugged, printed the public record, and slid it across. The new survey showed my property line had moved 6 feet west, straight through my master bathroom and under the foundation of the mansion on the hill everyone called the president's house. My land had shrunk overnight, and nobody had told me. On the way home, I stopped at the only coffee shop inside the gates. The barista wore a navy ribbon pinned to her apron. When I ordered, she smiled too wide and said, "Mr. Harlan, medium dark roast, no room, right?" I'd never been there before. I paid cash and left the change. That night, the knocks began. 3 sharp taps on the front door. Pause. 3 more. I waited with the crowbar raised. Nothing. I crept to the peephole. Empty porch. Then 3 taps from the back door. Same rhythm. Same result. Then the side window. Then the upstairs bedroom I wasn't using anymore. The knocks circled the house like a shark. Never hurried. Always 3 and 3, until I was spinning in the hallway trying to guard every wall at once. At 2:13 a.m., the knocking stopped. Silence pressed, so hard my ears rang. Then my phone lit up on the floor beside the mattress. A single text from a block number. "Open the door, James. We're cold." I hurled the phone against the wall. It didn't break. The screen just showed a new photo. Me, right at that exact second, swinging the crowbar at the phone, taken from the hallway ceiling I had personally painted 2 weeks ago. No camera up there. None. I grabbed the keys to my truck, barefoot and shaking, and ran outside. The night smelled like rain that refused to fall. My truck started fine, but when I threw it in reverse, the tires spun on nothing. The driveway was coated in a thin layer of wet grass seed that hadn't been there an hour ago. The truck fishtailed, then stopped dead. All 4 tires flat, valves sliced clean. I stood in the moonlight looking at my ruined truck and felt the last of my denial peel away. This wasn't an HOA. This was something older wearing a blazer. Headlights swept the street. A black golf cart rolled up silently and stopped. The woman from the first night sat in the passenger seat, legs crossed, red lips shining. The driver was the shark smile man. 4 more carts followed, forming a loose ring around my lawn. Nobody got out. They just sat there watching me the way people watch animals in zoos, curious, patient, certain the glass will hold. The woman raised a small megaphone. Her voice floated across the grass, sweet and reasonable. "James, you're making this harder than it needs to be. All we want is 6 feet. 6 little feet that were never yours to begin with. Give us the land and everything stops. The fines, the visits, the dreams. You can stay in the house. We'll even pay to move your bathroom." I found my voice. "Come take it, then." She smiled like a mother indulging a toddler. "We're not thieves, James. We're neighbors. And neighbors ask nicely first." The golf carts turned in perfect unison and glided away. The street lights dimmed as they passed under each one, as if the bulbs themselves were bowing. I slept in the truck that night with the doors locked and the crowbar across my lap. At dawn, I woke to find every window of my house covered from the outside with brown craft paper taped perfectly smooth. On the front door, someone had used a fat red marker to write a single line. "Dig." Under the word was a perfect hand-drawn arrow pointing straight down into my lawn. I looked at the spot the arrow indicated, exactly where the surveyors had knelt yesterday. The grass there was torn up in a neat square, the dirt beneath dark and freshly turned. Something glinted at the bottom of the shallow hole. I walked over, still barefoot, and reached in. My fingers closed around cold metal. I pulled up an old brass survey marker, green with age, stamped 1923. My property corner, if the original survey was right, was 6 feet east of where the new pins claimed. I looked up at the president's house on the hill. For the first time, I noticed his foundation sat on raw earth. No grass, no landscaping, just a scar of red clay, like an open wound. And in the tallest window, barely visible in the morning light, someone stood watching me. They raised one hand in a slow, friendly wave. Then the curtain fell back into place. I dropped the marker and ran inside to get a shovel. Whatever was buried under my house had been waiting 100 years for someone stupid enough to start digging. I was done asking nicely. I was ready to give them 6 feet. All right. 6 feet straight down. The shovel bit earth like it had been waiting for me. Each scoop came up black and wet, smelling of iron and old secrets. By the time the hole was knee-deep, sweat soaked my shirt, even though the morning was cold. I kept glancing at the president's house on the hill. The curtain never moved again, but I felt the stare like a hand on the back of my neck. At 2 feet down, the blade struck something hard. Not rock. Wood. Old, swollen planks laid side by side. I scraped dirt away with my hands and uncovered a trapdoor. Oak, black with age, iron hinges green and pitted. A rusted padlock the size of my fist held it shut. Someone had painted a fresh gold WC crest right over the keyhole, still tacky. I stared at it for a long minute, then went inside for the bolt cutters I'd bought after the truck tires. The lock snapped with a sound like a gunshot. I hesitated, listening. Nothing. Just birds and the distant hum of a lawn mower that never seemed to get any closer. I lifted the trapdoor. Stone steps descended into darkness, cut straight into the bedrock. The air that rolled up was warm and thick, carrying the smell of candle smoke and wet stone. Someone had been down there recently. I grabbed a flashlight and went in. The stairs ended in a narrow tunnel, walls slick with moisture, ceiling low enough that I had to duck. Timber braces every 10 feet, ancient and hand-hewn. Every brace had the same symbol carved deep, WC, inside a circle of thorns. The tunnel ran straight under my foundation and kept going toward the hill. 20 yards in, the flashlight caught movement. A rat? No, too deliberate. I froze. Footsteps, soft and bare, coming toward me from the dark ahead. One set, unhurried. I raised the flashlight like a weapon. The beam landed on a little girl, maybe 8 years old, barefoot in a white nightgown. She stopped 10 feet away and stared. Her eyes were wrong. Too large, too black, no whites at all. "You're not supposed to be here yet," she whispered. Her voice echoed from everywhere and nowhere. They said the new owner would be obedient. I found my tongue. "Who are you?" She tilted her head. "We've always been here, under the pretty houses, under the pretty rules." Then she smiled, and her teeth were too sharp. "You opened the door. That makes you ours now." She took one step back and melted into the dark like smoke. I ran. I scrambled up the stairs, burst into daylight, and slammed the trapdoor so hard the hinges screamed. My chest heaved. My phone buzzed in my pocket, dead for hours, suddenly alive. One new message, no sender. "Welcome to the real Willow Creek, Mr. Harlan. Orientation begins at midnight. Bring a candle. Don't be late this time." I looked at the hole, at the trapdoor, at the perfect lawns stretching away like nothing had happened. Then I did the only thing that still made sense. I went inside, locked every door, and started pouring gasoline. I soaked the floors, the curtains, the brand new couch I hadn't even sat on properly. I made a trail from the kitchen to the front door and stood on the porch with the red plastic and empty at my feet and a box of matches in my shaking hand. Across the street, curtains twitched in every house at once. Navy blazers appeared on porches like ghosts materializing. Golf carts rolled out of driveways without a sound and formed a silent ring around my lawn. The woman stepped out of the lead cart holding the same megaphone. "James," her voice floated, gentle, almost sad. "Burning the house doesn't burn the covenant. The land remembers. The hill remembers. You remember." I struck a match. The flame trembled between my fingers. She smiled. "Light it. We'll just build another one, and you'll still owe the 6 feet." The match burned down on my fingers. I dropped it. It went out on the concrete. Behind me, the front door I had locked stood wide open. A single white candle flickered on the hallway floor, wax pooling like blood. On the wall, someone had painted in dripping gold. Midnight is almost here. The golf carts turned and glided away. Every porch light on the street blinked off at once. The sky was suddenly too dark for noon. I walked inside because I had run out of places to go. The candle burned steady even when I slammed the door. Footsteps sounded beneath my feet, soft, bare, many of them, moving under the floorboards toward the tunnel. I sat on the gasoline-soaked floor and waited for midnight. I finally understood the rules. My land, their rules. And the house wasn't mine at all. It was just the newest lid on the oldest box in Willow Creek. At 11:59 p.m., every clock in the house stopped. The candle on the floor went out by itself, and the trapdoor under my kitchen table that hadn't been there an hour ago creaked open on brand-new hinges. A small pale hand reached up and set a second candle on the tile. Then another hand. Then another. They were coming up to begin the orientation I kept missing. And this time I wasn't allowed to say no. The first child climbed out barefoot and silent, nightgown brushing the floor like a bride's train. Then another. Then 5 more, all pale, all black-eyed, all smiling the same small, polite smile. They arranged themselves in a perfect half-circle around me, dripping tunnel water on my gasoline-soaked hardwood. The tallest, the girl from earlier, carried the unlit candle. She placed it in my hand, closed my fingers around it, and pressed until the wax cracked. "Light it," she whispered. Her breath smelled of wet earth and birthday cake. I couldn't move. My legs had turned to cement. The crowbar lay 3 feet away, useless. She leaned close enough that I saw my reflection in those oil-slick eyes. "We've waited 73 years for someone to open the door from above. You're late, James Harlan, but you're here now. Light it." Somewhere in the house, a clock I didn't own began to chime midnight, 12 slow strokes that vibrated in my teeth. On the 12th chime, every child opened its mouth at once, and a single adult voice, the woman in the navy blazer, poured out of all of them, layered and terrible. Orientation begins. The candle in my hand ignited by itself. Blue flame, no heat. They turned as one and walked toward the front door. It opened before they reached it. Outside, the street was lit by hundreds of identical blue candles floating 6 inches above every lawn, every driveway, every mailbox. The golf carts were gone. In their place stood every resident of Willow Creek Estates in perfect rows, navy blazers buttoned to the throat, faces calm, eyes shining with the same black glass as the children. The little girl took my wrist. Her skin was cold as creek stones. She pulled me forward. I went. There was no choice anymore. My feet moved without permission. We stepped onto the porch. The floating candles drifted aside like curtains. A path of blue fire led straight down my driveway, through the ruined gate I'd never fixed, and up the hill toward the president's house. The children walked on both sides of me, humming a tune I almost remembered from childhood, something about a ring and falling down. Halfway up the hill, the humming stopped. The tallest girl looked up at me. "Do you know what's under the hill, James?" I tried to speak. My throat was full of rust. She answered for me. "The first 6 feet. The ones they keep taking back." We reached the wrought iron gates of the mansion. They were already open. The driveway was lined with every HOA officer I'd ever seen, plus dozens I hadn't. They held clipboards that glowed faintly, pages turning by themselves in the windless night. As I passed, each one checked something off and smiled the exact same smile. Inside the foyer, the air was thick with candle smoke and roses left too long in water. A grand staircase swept upward into darkness. The children released my hands and fanned out, taking positions on the steps like choir boys. At the very top stood the woman in the navy blazer. She looked exactly the same as the first night, except now her eyes were solid black too. She opened her arms. "Welcome home, Mr. Harlan." Behind her, the wall was not a wall. It was raw earth, red clay packed tight, roots twisting through it like veins. Survey markers, old brass ones, new steel ones, every date from 1923 to last month, jutted out in a perfect straight line 6 feet inside the house. The property line. My property line. She descended 3 steps. "You kept saying my land, my rules." Cute. But the land was never yours to claim. It was borrowed. And tonight the note comes due. I finally found my voice. What are you? She laughed, and every child laughed with her, a sound like glass breaking underwater. With a covenant, James. The original one. In 1923, the founders built this neighborhood on top of something that didn't want to stay buried. They promised 6 feet of every new lot forever. A tithe, a tax, paid in dirt and memory. Most owners never notice. They sign the papers, hang the wreath, pay the fines, and the hill drinks quietly. But she touched my cheek with fingers that left frost. You refused the drink. The children began to sing again, softer now, words I couldn't catch. The floating candles outside rose higher, forming a ring of blue fire around the entire hill. She stepped aside and gestured to the earthen wall. Your 6 feet are right there. All you have to do is walk in. The house stays standing. The fines disappear. You wake up tomorrow, and everything feels normal. People do it all the time. I looked at the clay. Faces pushed against it from the other side. Faint like fossils. Mouths open in silent screams. Hands too, palms out, fingers splayed. Dozens of them. Hundreds maybe. Every owner who had paid the tithe. My knees buckled. She caught me before I fell. Or, she whispered into my ear, you can keep refusing, and we take the 6 feet anyway. But we take it from you instead of the land. The children stopped singing. The silence that followed was worse. She released me and stepped back up the stairs. You have until the candle burns out. The blue flame on my candle flared taller. Wax began running upward, defying gravity, dripping into the air and vanishing. I looked from the wall to the children to the rows of blazered neighbors waiting outside like paper dolls. Then I did the only thing left that was still mine to do. I turned around and walked back down the hill. Every candle on the path winked out as I passed. The children didn't follow. No one tried to stop me. They just watched with those terrible patient smiles. I walked through my broken gate, across my ruined lawn, into my gasoline-soaked house. The trapdoor in the kitchen was still open. Warm air breathed up from below. I stood at the edge and looked down into the dark. The candle in my hand had maybe 2 inches left. I took 1 step forward and let myself fall. The flame went out on the way down, but I was still holding it when I hit the bottom, and the dart down there already knew my name. I landed hard on stone, knees buckling, breath punched out of me. The candle was gone, yet I could see. A faint red glow pulsed from the walls themselves, veins of light threading through the rock like arteries. The tunnel stretched both ways now, wider than before, ceiling lost in shadow. The air tasted of copper and old smoke. Footsteps approached from the left, soft, deliberate. The little girl in the nightgown walked out of the dark, carrying my lit candle. The blue flame had turned crimson and burned perfectly still. She offered it without a word. When I took it, her fingers brushed mine and left frostbite. You chose the hard way, she said, almost proud. Good. The easy ones never last. Behind her, more children emerged, dozens, maybe hundreds, spilling from side tunnels I hadn't seen before. All barefoot, all black-eyed, all smiling like they'd been waiting their whole lives for company. They formed 2 silent lines, leaving a path straight ahead. I walked because the candle pulled me. Every step made the flame grow brighter, and every step showed me more. Names carved into the walls, dates going back to 1923, then 1897, then earlier. Some names were fresh, still bleeding sap from the letters. My own name appeared 10 feet ahead, already half finished, the J and the H cut deep and new. The tunnel opened into a cavern the size of a cathedral. The floor was packed earth, perfectly smooth. In the center stood a waist-high pillar of red clay, wet and shining. 6 feet wide, 6 feet long, exactly 6 feet deep. An empty grave waiting for its first occupant who still had a pulse. Around it stood every adult I'd seen in navy blazers, but the blazers were gone now. They wore plain black suits, old-fashioned, funeral clothes from another century. Their faces were the same, yet not, skin too tight, mouths too wide. The woman from the porch stood closest to the pillar. Her eyes were normal again, brown and tired and almost human. She spoke without the chorus this time, just her own voice, quiet and sad. This is the root, James. The real covenant. One living soul every generation, given willingly or taken anyway. The hill stays quiet, the houses stay pretty, the children stay fed. That's the bargain the founders made when they tried to bury what was already here. I looked at the children ringing the cavern. Some couldn't have been older than 5 when they stopped aging. Others looked ancient in child bodies, skin papery, joints knobby. How long? I asked. Since the first surveyor drove a brass pin through something that screamed, she said. The land wants its 6 feet of flesh, not dirt. Dirt doesn't remember. Flesh does. The candle was down to an inch. Wax ran up my wrist like warm blood. She stepped aside. Lie down, James. Make it quick, and we let you sleep. Fight, and the children play first. The nearest child licked his lips. His tongue was black. I looked at the pillar, at the hollow carved for a man exactly my size. My name was now complete on the wall behind it, finished while we spoke. Then I saw the one thing they hadn't expected. The candle flame wasn't the only light anymore. A second glow, faint but growing, came from the tunnel behind me. Orange. Real fire. Gasoline fire. I smiled for the first time since moving in. You forgot something, I said. The woman's tired eyes widened. I poured 20 gallons of premium unleaded upstairs before I jumped, I told her, and I left the pilot lights on every burner in the kitchen. A low rumble rolled through the cavern. Dust sifted from the ceiling. Somewhere far above, my beautiful new house was becoming a torch. The children hissed and backed away from the tunnel mouth as heat shimmered out of it. The woman lunged for me, but the flame on my candle flared huge and white, blinding everyone for a heartbeat. When sight returned, the candle was gone, stub burned to nothing between my fingers. I was free. I ran, not toward the pillar, not toward her, toward the side wall where the oldest names were carved. My shoulder hit stone, and I dug my fingers into the soft red clay, like a climber finding holds. The wall was warm, alive, pulsing. I climbed. Behind me, chaos exploded. Children screaming in voices too adult, the woman shouting orders that cracked like whips, the roar of fire racing down the tunnel I'd fallen through. Heat blasted my back, singeing hair, blistering skin. I reached a narrow ledge 20 feet up and rolled onto it just as flame roared into the cavern below. Blue at first from the gasoline, then white, then hell orange. The pillar of clay flashed to brick in seconds. The black-suited adults burned without sound, suits igniting like paper. The children tried to scatter into side tunnels, but fire filled every exit, hungry and thorough. I crawled along the ledge as the cavern became an oven. Smoke choked the air, thick and chemical. My lungs seized. Vision tunneled. Then a small cold hand grabbed my wrist. The first girl, the one who started it all, stood on the ledge beside me, nightgown already smoldering at the hem. Her black eyes reflected the inferno like twin mirrors. You can't kill what's already dead, she whispered, and smiled with real affection. But you burned the pretty mask off. That was brave. She kissed my cheek, frost on fire, and let go. I fell backward into the smoke and heat and darkness. The last thing I felt was the hill itself screaming through every stone as centuries of borrowed time caught fire all at once. Then nothing. Years later, when the new subdivision brochures went out, they called it Willow Creek Phase 2, luxury living on reclaimed land. The lot sold out in a weekend. Every house came with the same bronze mailbox, the same burgundy door, and a brand new survey guaranteeing you every square inch you paid for. They never mentioned the faint scorch marks under the fresh sod, or why the grass grows a little too green over 6 particular feet behind every foundation. But sometimes on quiet nights when the HOA president rings the bell with her perfect smile and her clipboard of mandatory rules, new homeowners swear they hear something moving beneath the floorboards. Slow, patient footsteps counting 6 by 6 by 6. And somewhere in the dark under the hill, a single red candle still burns, waiting for the next stubborn bastard who thinks the land is his. My land. My rules? No, darling. My land never stopped screaming mine. If this story had you checking your own mailbox at 3 a.m., gripping your phone a little tighter, and side-eyeing every perfectly manicured lawn in your neighborhood, then do me a solid. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what happens when the next homeowner decides to fight back. Because the Hill is already hiring new officers in Navy Blazers, and Phase 3 just broke ground.